Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Brian's Conscience. Oh, yes, you're too kind. Thank you. Today, we will be reading a passage from the 4th book of Maccabees. Cue the music, please. Philosophical in the highest degree is the question I propose to discuss, namely whether the inspired reason is supreme ruler over the passions. And to the philosophy of it, I would seriously entreat your earnest attention. For not only is the subject generally necessary as a branch of knowledge, but it includes the praise of the greatest of virtues, whereby I mean self-control. That is to say, if reason is proved to control the passions, adverse to temperance, gluttony, and lust, it is also clearly shown to be the Lord over the passions, like malevolence, opposed to justice, and over those opposed to manliness, namely rage and pain and fear. But some may ask, if the reason is master over the passions, why does it not control forgetfulness and ignorance? Their objective being to cast ridicule, that is. The answer is that reason is not master over defects inhering in the mind itself, but over the passions or moral defects that are adverse to justice and manliness and temperance and judgment. And its actions in their case is not to extirpate the passions, but to enable us to resist them successfully. I can bring before you many examples drawn from various sources whereby reason has proved itself master over the passions, but the best instance by far that I can give is the noble conduct of those who died for the sake of virtue. Our inquiry is then whether the reason is supreme master over the passions, but we must define what the reason is as opposed to what the passion is, and how many forms of passion there are, and whether the reason is supreme over all of them. Reason I take to be the mind, preferring with clear deliberation the life of wisdom. Wisdom I take to be the knowledge of things divine and human and of their causes. This I take to be the cultural acquirement under the law, through which we learn due reverence the things of God, and for our worldly profit the things of man. Now wisdom is manifested under the forms of judgment and justice and courage and temperance. But judgment or self-control is the one that dominates them all. And through it, the truth, reason, asserts its authority over the passions. But of the passions there are two comprehensive sources, namely pleasure and pain. And either belongs essentially also to the soul as well as to the body. And with respect both to pleasure and pain, there are many causes whereby the passion have certain sequences. Thus, while desire goes before pleasure, satisfaction follows after. And while fear goes before pain, after pain comes sorrow. Anger, again, if a man will be traced the course of his feelings, is a passion in which are blended both pleasure and pain. Under pleasure also comes that moral debasement, which exhibits the widest variety of the passions. It manifests itself in the soul as ostentation and covetousness and vainglory and contentiousness and backbiting, and in the body as eating of strange meat and gluttony and gormandizing in secret. Now pleasure and pain being as it were two trees growing from body and soul, many offshoots of these passions sprout up, and each man's reason as master gardener, weeding and pruning and binding up and turning on the water and directing it hither and thither, brings the thicket of dispositions and passions under domestication. For while reason is the guide of the virtues, it is master of the passions. Observe now, in the first place, that reason becomes supreme over the passions, in virtue of the inhibitory action of temperance. Temperance, I take it, is the repression of the desires, but of the desires, some are mental and some are physical, and both kinds are clearly controlled by the reason. When we are tempted towards forbidden meats, how do we come to relinquish the pleasure to be derived from them? It is not that reason has power to repress the appetites, but in my opinion, it is so. Accordingly, when we feel a desire to eat water animals and birds and beasts and meats of every description forbidden to us under the law, we abstain through the predominance of reason. For propensions of our appetites are checked, inhibited by the temperate mind, and all the movements of the body obey the bridle of reason. And what is there to be surprised at if the natural desire of the soul to enjoy the fruition of beauty is quenched? This certainly is why we praise the virtuous Joseph, because by his reason, with a mental effort, he checked the carnal impulse. For he, a young man at the age when physical desire is strong, and by reason quenched his impulse and his passions. And reason is proved to subdue the impulse not only of sexual desire, but of all sorts of covetings. For the law says, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor anything that is thy neighbor's." Verily, the reason is capable of controlling the passions. Thank you.